If you guys have been watching some of the recent Hedera videos on the channel, then you already know that I have been watching this overall trend line to be retested yet again this week. We have been holding this trend line so far. Obviously, if we lose this trend, it's not going to be a pretty sight on this overall chart, and that's why we're really kind of focused on this. Now, initially, my main focus was always the highs going all the way back to like March of 2024. For those that know about March of 2024, that's the prior run up before we, ran in like December all the way into like January for most altcoins. March of 2024 was the initial push to the upside. And we recently tested this back in April and also back in June. This was basically our double bottom on the weekly view. So if we do lose this trend, we would be looking at this being retested. However, the big issue with that is the more that we do retest support or even resistance, it does become weaker, which means that it could potentially break. Now, if we do break this, I know that you guys are probably going to say, well, what about the wick on, October 10th? This was just a wick. We're talking about a close below this. But if we do lose this low, then we would be looking at the next prior highs to be retested around like 9 cents. We do not want to see that, but it is a possibility. That's why I have been focused on this trend line for so long, and I've been watching to see if these levels do hold. Now, just like I said in those videos, the main focus here is what Bitcoin wants to do, and if we are going to lose crucial support on this chart as well. The main thing, and one of the most important things to really kind of focus on, is the weekly candle close for most of these charts, because on the weekly so far we have been maintaining a trend line, and if we lose that trend on the weekly, then that could signal much deeper lows being retested, which would take, of course, HBAR back down below 10 cents yet again. Now, will that be a huge opportunity for us that want to buy? Sure, it is, but it's also, something that we don't really want to see. We want to see, bullish structure. We want to see strong structure forms. So until that happens, we just need to be very cautious. Now, I do want to talk about a few things happening around Hedera. I have been looking at listings happening for Hedera for quite some time, and we just got a new one. Now, again, it's not like a massive T1 exchange because Hedera is already listed on most of those exchanges. However, it is still a pretty decently sized exchange that's in a nice area as well. And that's, of course, coins.ph. This is the #1 fiat and crypto e-wallet in the Philippines. And now Hedera is live on this platform. You could trade HBAR with PHP or USDT and enjoy deep liquidity right on Coins Pro. Now, again, not a crazy massive exchange, but still a pretty large exchange, which we just like to see more exposure to HBAR realistically. So it doesn't really matter the size of the exchange. It's the fact that we are now starting to see even more expansions around the market side for Hedera. And, Hedera already has over 162 different pairs on multiple exchanges. So this is very good to see. And again, it's just another addition to the list of exchanges that already have HBAR listed. Now, beyond that, let's talk about DeFi, because, DeFi is probably one of the biggest things that crypto really focused on initially. I feel like DeFi has always been a huge selling point for anyone that's jumping into crypto initially. And it was ultimately the biggest selling point for crypto, since inception. Everyone wants to be their own bank. Everyone wants to have control over their finances. And DeFi essentially allows us to, kind of disconnect from the traditional world of finance that is, 100% dominated by these big institutional players and middlemen. And, again, DeFi allows us to, take control of our own finances and also send and receive money at a fraction of a penny. So DeFi has always been a big focus of mine. And when it comes back to the DeFi side of things for Hedera, we know that the DeFi market has been expanding rapidly. And one of the big players that recently launched about roughly a year or so ago, I think it was like right around like October of 2024, was Bonzo Finance. Now, since then, Bonzo Finance has been building. They've been continuously expanding their platform, and their new Bonzo Vaults is coming soon. I'm very excited about this because, again, Bonzo Finance isn't that small of a name anymore on Hedera. They do have about roughly $26 million tied to them. At one point in time, going back to July, they did have about roughly $58 million. Right now, it's kind of consolidating a little bit. We probably have this run up yet again once we start to see the retail flood come back. But, Bonzo Finance is a pretty solid platform. We've talked about them quite a bit on the channel ever since they did launch, and it's been a very successful protocol on the Hedera DeFi ecosystem. Now, talking about the Hedera DeFi ecosystem, it's still pretty flat. Most DeFi protocols are right now, or I shouldn't say, protocols, but ecosystems, if you will. I mean, even if we look at, for example, Ethereum, Ethereum has about almost $76 billion tied to it. We did hit a peak back in August and September, and since then we've been kind of, selling off. Most platforms, or I shouldn't say platforms, but most networks are in a very similar stage right now where, they are starting to see that significant downtrend from their recent highs. Some of them have never bounced back, like, for example, Polygon, Avalanche still trying to bounce back. So again, the fact that Hedera's DeFi market started to really kind of break out back in March of 2024, and then of course back in January and February, and now we're starting to kind of just trail a little bit in a downtrend, waiting for DeFi to wake back up. I do think that the DeFi side of Hedera is going to have a much larger push to the upside, especially because of the efficiencies and with what Hedera is now focused on, which is of course institutional DeFi. So again, with a lot of these recent launches, with a lot of the building happening around the DeFi side from specific protocols like Bonzo Finance, I do expect the DeFi side of Hedera to really wake up. Now, also on top of that, tokenization. So we have been tracking tokenization on Hedera for quite some time. Currently on rwa.xyz, there's 26 RWAs tied back to Hedera. A lot of this is tokenized real estate, actually, coming from Red Swan. We also have a few stablecoins. Let's just go to asset class real quick. So a ton of US treasuries coming from Archix. We also have Kaio, and then, of course, stablecoins. We have 3 stablecoins, one coming from Straits X Singapore dollar, the Australian digital dollar, and then also USDC. And then outside of that, we have a ton of real estate. Then we have private credit as well, non-US government debt, also coming from Archix, and then Kaio as well with institutional funds, and then Diamond Standard as well. So again, there's a lot of RWAs on Hedera. We're just waiting for the value to be tracked. RWA.xyz seems to still be adding a lot of tokenized assets. And again, we love to see well over 20 plus RWAs. Right now, this is saying 32 in terms of the results. So it's hard to say exactly how many RWAs we have tied back to Hedera. You got to remember that Hedera has been tokenizing for well over 3+ years now. So I would imagine that the RWA count is probably significantly higher than 26 or even, going down here, 32. And I could just imagine the amount of money that is tied back to Hedera as well in terms of tokenized RWAs. Now, talking about that, let's address a few things that have been happening around Hedera. Hedera actually recently put out a great post regarding October because, again, the months seem to, kind of be just going by so fast, but we also start to see in these months more and more updates, more and more, expansions happening. And Hedera is recording some of the largest months in history around the ecosystem, around major expansions, major updates, things like that. And I think that this is very important to focus on at this moment in the space while, prices are still kind of dragging down. They're still kind of just going sideways. Nothing's really happening in terms of price action. Most people would argue that the space has been pretty negative over the last couple months. I would argue the last almost 10 months for a lot of these projects because, again, with Hedera, the last high was back in January. So it's been, 10 months since we made a new high on this chart. And that's where we start to see that peak negativity happening in this space. But during this time, we are seeing months like, for example, October, where we did see another groundbreaking month for institutional grade Hedera, and well, this is just saying for the Hedera network, that's institutional grade. But we have from an HBAR ETF listing and network staking boost to agentic DeFi and verifiable AI for governments and enterprises. Let's dive in. So right off the rip, we do have, of course, the Canary Funds HBAR ETF. This was a big one. This got listed on the U.S. stock market, which was a monumental achievement for the industry as a whole, as the third cryptocurrency to get a listing after only Bitcoin and Ethereum. The network's institutional grade differentiators shown through. And then also, on top of that, the HBAR ETF launch was not in isolation, but against the backdrop of another large announcement. As we continue to drive both institutional and retail adoption of Hedera, we sent an additional 250 million HBAR to the native Hedera staking account, which also got announced back on the 22nd. And then, of course, we do have, following the news that tokenized stocks like Tesla and Apple were coming to Hedera DeFi, CBO Gregory L. Bell took the stage at Blockworks DAS with Swarm Markets to discuss the latest developments. In line with our work to expand the Hedera retail community across DeFi and beyond, we then launched the first ever Hedera Vietnam Builders Meetup for Hedera developers in Southeast Asia. Alongside our partners VAR Meta and J. Cole H at Hashgraph, we brought together local builders, developers, and founders to explore real-world use cases on Hedera. On the retail side, through Dead Pixel's Ghost Club, Forevermint and marketplaces SentX and Kabila app, October revealed that Q3 was one of the largest NFT months on record, with trading volume soaring over 16x. We look forward to the next mint party. As highlighted by the DApp Radar ecosystem report, this ecosystem growth was not isolated to NFT volume. DApp activity is up 190% year over year. On-chain transactions surged 386%, and smart contract volumes climbed 88%. Quarter over quarter to $3.7 billion. Working to keep the on-chain momentum, Agent Hustle AI then launched Agentic DeFi on Hedera. Through the launch of their AI agent, users can now set conditional DeFi orders all through the ease of natural language. Closing out the month on an enterprise AI high, Equity Lab and Accenture then unveiled a new verifiable AI architecture at NVIDIA GTC, enabling agencies and enterprises to deploy AI agents with encrypted attestations and policy-enforced operations. And again, this is just showing us how big some of these months for Hedera are becoming. And this really is just the beginning. I do think that we are going to continue to see bigger months for Hedera. I think that we're going to continuously see more and more partnerships, more and more announcements, ETF listings as well. This really is just the beginning. And we also just got another big update from Hedera Foundation actually on the 10th, so just 2 days ago, which was the fact that Hedera got added to the Google Cloud BigQuery public datasets, enabling highly scalable cross-chain data accessibility. As we continue to onboard the world's largest organizations, this provides core infrastructure for institutional grade DeFi and enterprise applications. Again, going back to this announcement, right? If we're going all the way back to this one, this is all based around institutional DeFi. The biggest thing to focus on here is Hedera is preparing to bring major institutional players on chain for the Hedera network. I think that this is the thing that everyone is kind of missing here. Hedera has had big plans for so long for institutional players to bring, their assets on chain, to bring, even their user base to these networks as well on chain. And Hedera has been prepared for this for so long. But with some of these recent announcements from, the institutional DeFi focus, which by the way, they do mention here as well. I think it was in this one. Yeah. So for now, they are prepared for institutional grade DeFi protocols to launch as well and to be built behind the scenes for Q1 of 2026. And then, of course, this update as well provides us with that insight that they want to make sure that they have highly scalable cross-chain data accessibility because they want to continue to onboard the world's largest organizations. This provides core infrastructure for institutional grade DeFi and enterprise applications. Hedera is planning some pretty big moves going forward into 2026, and I'm very excited about this because institutional DeFi is going to be one of the biggest waves for this space. It's the number one reason why players like Ripple are also focused on institutional DeFi at a time where all of the institutional players are really kind of lining up at the crypto door. Hedera's inclusion in BigQuery public datasets allows developers, analysts, and enterprises to query the full transaction history of the Hedera network alongside other leading blockchains. With BigQuery's capabilities, users can now compare transaction costs and speeds between Hedera and other blockchain networks, track tokenized assets and NFTs across different ecosystems, including Hedera's native token service, analyze smart contract execution and DeFi trends across multiple chains, conduct historical research on Hedera's growth, network performance, and transaction volume. We also have Hedera Foundation has open sourced all ETL scripts and deployment frameworks, ensuring that the broader blockchain community can contribute to and extend the dataset's functionality. This ensures that the integration remains collaborative, transparent, and adaptable to future developments. The BigQuery public dataset for Hedera will be actively maintained with periodic updates aligned with network changes and scheme improvements. This guarantees that developers, enterprises, and researchers always have access to the most reliant or relevant and accurate blockchain data. So very excited about this. I think that this is great. And again, it's another big puzzle piece to put together the institutional DeFi puzzle for Hedera. And again, it's at a time where we're starting to see the DeFi market for Hedera waking up. We're starting to see tokenized assets being added to RWA.xyz to be tracked. And it's also at the same exact time that we are seeing more and more big months for Hedera being added. And again, I do think that almost every single month going forward is going to be another big month for most of these networks, because you got to understand that regulations are picking up. We're starting to see the Clarity Act get worked on in a big way, which is, possible to be passed through by the end of Q1 of 2026. This is also at the same exact time that institutional players are now voicing out their vote of confidence for crypto. They want to line up, they want to tap in. Again, these networks that were really kind of focused on for so long on this channel, like Hedera, they might have seemed boring back in 2021, 2022, 2023. Today, they're some of the most exciting networks because they were at the forefront of what's coming to crypto. So even though price action is down a bit, even though, we've been addressing the price action, which is the big elephant in the room, I feel as if everything that's happening right now, when we zoom out and we really kind of look at this real quick, and we're just seeing where we're at right now, I don't even think that we really started the party just yet. I feel as if we're at this point in time back here in 2020, except, we're kind of, sorry, let me redraw that, except we're at this stage over here, which means we still have this major run up to the upside still left in store for HBAR holders going forward. And I think that this is just short term still. A lot of people have been asking me, like, Nick, what is your short-term view? Like, what exactly is the time frame here? Honestly, I think anything but, before 2028 is all short-term. I know that that's crazy to say because it's 2 years, but you got to understand that, the next 5 years for crypto is just going to be essentially up only from adoption, from value being added on chain, to stablecoin growth. And this is all going to lead to a lot of these networks also growing in size. So although, we're still looking at bull and bear markets, I do think that eventually we are going to move away from that and be in a utility cycle for crypto. And I think that once we get into that cycle for crypto, people are going to realize exactly why some of these networks like Hedera are so bullish right now in this space, because again, their true value will essentially come out. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on, because there's more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.